All right, can everybody see that? Cool. Okay, so just a quick overview of the process and timeline. By June 30th, we will send a performance report to each school. So that performance report will include performance over the charter term in the over the NSPF, the academic performance framework, the organizational performance framework, and the financial performance framework. So we will basically compile all of that information, put it together in one document, and we will get those sent to you by June 30th. We will email it directly to the school leader and the board chair, and then those individuals can share it with whomever may be relevant. By September 1st, schools must submit their notice of intent to renew the charter contract. That's a letter that goes on letterhead. We'll get into that a little bit, but those are submitted via Epicenter by September 1st. The timeline or the window for the renewal application is October 1st to the 15th. That will also be on Epicenter. Schools have to submit that. Your governing boards must approve it. We look for the approval minutes as part of that application. And then in November or December, the SPCSA board will hear the renewal recommendations. So that's kind of the full process. And it starts with that performance report from us. You guys do the notice of intent and the application, and then we make the final recommendation to the SPCSA board. You should plan to be in attendance in that meeting and have a school representative and a board representative in attendance as well. You won't have to give a presentation, but it's good to be there to address the board, give them some information if they ask, and be available for questions should they have any. I will also say between October 15th when you submit it and before it's presented to the board, we will reach out to you and let you know what our recommendation is going to be. So it won't be a surprise to you, you know, what our renewal recommendation is, including the number of years we're recommending for renewal. One thing I do want to just make very clear is that the Nevada Administrative Code does prevent a renewal from including a material change. So you cannot do something that would require an amendment basically between now and the actual charter contract being renewed. If you plan to have a material change as part of your operations, that is going to have to be heard as a separate amendment request after the contract has been renewed. So it can't happen at the same time. Just want to make sure everybody's clear on that. It kind of puts us at a pause, essentially from here to the end of this calendar year for any material changes that would require an amendment. So the first thing, I'll get into kind of the steps a little bit more in detail, but the first thing that comes from us will be the performance report. Like I said, we'll send those
Katie,
by June.
Can I cut in here?
Yeah.
The only thing that seems not to jig with that is potential transportation issues with the uncertainty around the grant funding and stuff. And so I know we had to do an amendment and all that when we have transportation plans.
Yeah, that's a really good point. We'll work through that one. We can work through that.
Okay. So, I guess my point is we probably know that way sooner than December. It would be in the summer. And so maybe the order is the other way.
Yeah, we can kind of work through that. I'm also not 100% clear if you're already offering transportation, if it's going to require an additional amendment. I'm not really clear on sort of how that's all going to work. So Ignacio, we'll write that down and we'll circle back, but we don't want that. We don't want this process to prevent you from being able to do that. So we'll work on that. Sorry, I don't have a better answer today. All right, so performance report it will be pretty simple. It's a summary of the performance of the charter school based upon the terms of the charter contract. So the years the school's been in operation. If any deficiencies have been identified, that would be like a notice of concern or a notice of breach on the performance contract or on the performance framework, or a deficiency identified in a site evaluation. That would be included in the performance report. It will also contain the requirements of the application for renewal. So it'll give you kind of a high level overview of what's going to be included, but you'll get a separate application document to actually complete. And then it will also include the criteria that will apply in making a determination for renewal. The one thing that won't be included in the performance report will be academic performance for the current school year, 24-25, because we won't have those results by June 30th.
I have a quick question on that real quick.
Yeah.
And I might have missed this somewhere. But do they even know how they're going to score this year based off of the different SBAC and how they're going to correlate growth scores and stuff with that?
NDE has assured us that the SBAC, is it blueprint or benchmark? I can't remember what the shortened one's called. Will provide the same comparable assessment scores as the previous version of the SBAC. So as far as we know at this point, it should provide comparable data. However, that is one of the top issues we've communicated with them. And so if there is an issue or if it doesn't seem comparable, we will work on communicating that with them at that time. But yes, we have shared that concern with them ad nauseum, but they said that there's a study that shows that the scores are comparable. So they told us to be quiet. Other questions on the performance report? Okay.
Hi, sorry, no, won't me again. I was just
Oh,
having
go ahead.
trouble unmuting myself. So I know you mentioned we won't have academic data, but typically the finance framework is even later. And so this is just up to 23, 24, because the audits are due like November 1 and then they go through a whole thing.
Yes, we definitely won't have financial or organizational scores we will have no data for the 24-25 school year in the performance report. When we make the recommendation to our board, we will include anything that's been reported for the 24-25 school year. But if the results aren't out and haven't been voted on by the SPCSA board, then they won't be included in the recommendation. So at that point, we should theoretically have Nevada report card stuff. We should have academic performance framework. But yeah, you're right. We will not have finance for 24-25 for any of these. All right, so the renewal letter, we will provide guidance by July 31st, but they are going to be submitted in Epicenter. These are on a school's letterhead and includes the plan, facility, and address of the school, the grades served during the current charter term, and the grades served for the upcoming charter term. Just a note there, again, an expansion of grades beyond what you're currently serving will require a material amendment, which would be heard after the charter contract is renewed. And then the letter of intent should be signed by the board chair and school leader. That's submitted to Epicenter by September 1st. Any questions on that?
So if we get a letter put together and get it on our May agenda, we can submit it whenever, just by that, whatever that date was. September 1st.
Yeah, September 1st. Yeah, I think that'll be fine.
All right.
And then the renewal application, we will get it to you by July 31st. We plan to actually have it released much earlier, but it will be no later than July 31st. As a very high level overview, it will include an executive summary, the renewal application, which is a summary of the performance, and we try to design the performance report we give you in a way that you can essentially just copy and paste that back in. Includes academic plans, organizational viability, fiscal soundness in plan, and any additional information that would support some of the previous narrative sections. Again, proposed changes here at the top, just an asterisk. Any proposed changes to the charter contract do require separate authority board action, which would happen after the charter contract is renewed. We will get this out. Our goal is to get it out by the end of May. And then you'll have plenty of time to work on it. And then it'll be due via Epicenter October 1st through the 15th. Any questions on that? Okay. And then Danny and I are the main points of contact as you're going through this process. If you have questions, if things come up, we're here to try to answer and try to help. We will work on that transportation question, and I can get you some additional information, which I am when I've done some research, but I don't see us preventing any school from providing transportation, even with this process going on. But we are the points of contact should you have questions once you actually see the application and materials. With that being said, are there any questions we can answer today?
I think we're good. Thank you.
Katie, if I can add one thing real quick too. So beyond just the grade level served, sometimes there's confusion around the enrollment. The cap of your your last school year, that like unless there's already enrollment growth changes built into the charter contract that are identified as in the event that school is renewed, which I don't think applies to anyone on this call, but I'm not entirely sure. You will use your the last school year's cap, and that's the cap that would be that we will use as to set for the renewal terms moving forward.
Hi, everybody. This is Karen Warner. I'm actually with Explore Academy Las Vegas, and I wanted to ask you about, will you be hosting other things along the way for questions and other trainings, or being new to the Nevada landscape? Also, what does the meeting or that be addressed later, the meeting in November, December, what does that look like, and what are the presentations? Does the school present, and what does that typically look like? Is that something that'll be covered later, or I could just reach out and ask about that?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So we provide this to sort of all the schools who are up for renewal. We don't do any trainings kind of throughout the process, but at the end, we've reviewed the application and we've kind of made our recommendation. We will reach out to each school and we'll meet with each school individually, and we'll share what we're recommending to the SPCSA board so that you guys are made aware of it before the board meeting and before our stuff is posted. At that time, we can talk about, kind of based on whatever the recommendation is, we can talk a little bit more in detail about what the board meeting will look like. But typically what happens is a school comes up for renewal. Let's say it's Explore. We as SPCSA staff will kind of say, here's what we're recommending. Here's why. We'll provide the board with our recommendation. The board will ask us any questions that they may have about the recommendation. The school is usually sitting at the table. If the school wants to share any information with the board, they can. The board can then answer questions can ask questions of the school, and the school is there to answer, but there's really no formal presentation required. It's just kind of, you're up there, you're there to ask questions. Some people come up and say, thank you. And, we're really excited about blah, blah, blah. But there's no formal presentation.
Thank you for that.
Yeah. Anything else?
Yeah, I just had a quick question. This is Ignacio Repeturo. What is the universe of outcomes? I just want to make sure I understand. There's a possibility for different length terms, and then there's the possibility for certain condition. I don't know. Assuming everything's all clear, my assumption is it's a 6-year term, but there's also potentially a longer option too in the law.
Yes. So the first kind of binary set of decisions is to renew or non-renew. If the charter contract is renewed, it's for a period of 3 to 10 years. And so we make that determination primarily based on academic performance data. The stronger the academic performance data has been over the course of the current charter term, the longer charter term we recommend. Per the Nevada law, academic performance data is supposed to carry the most weight for any renewal decision. But 3 to 10 years is sort of the length options that you'd be looking at. And when we meet kind of later on, and we'll tell you, hey, we're recommending your charter contract be renewed for 7 years or for 3 years, and we'll talk about why. Any other questions? All right, well, we will be in touch. We will send out the renewal application probably first. So you should expect to see that relatively soon. And then the performance report, you'll hear from us by June 30th. And then we'll look for those letter of intents and the final applications. And should you have any questions at all throughout this process, please feel free to reach out to me and Danny. But we appreciate all of your time today. And like I said, let us know if there are any questions. Otherwise, we hope you have a great rest of your day.